Hello guys, good afternoon. In the last class, what we have completed? Any doubts in that? Typecasting. Any doubts in typecasting? Next concept is final keyword. Final keyword. Final keyword. Final. Final is a keyword in Java programming. Final is a keyword in Java programming language. Final is a keyword. We can make a class as final, and we can declare variables as final, and we can declare methods as final. In case of variables, in case of variables, if I declare any variable as final, what happens? If I declare any variable as final and initialize with some value, if I declare any variable as final and initialize with some value, this variable value will be fixed. This variable value will be fixed. This variable value, the value for this variable is fixed, cannot be changed further, cannot be changed further. Final int I, final variable values we cannot change. Final variable values we cannot change. Once it got initialized, once it got initialized, we cannot able to change the values of the variable. That is fixed. Now at line number 13, I'll be getting error. At line number 13. Now this is the first time initialization of the I. First time initialization of the I. I is equal to 10. Now this I value is fixed. We cannot able to change it further. Now once again, I'm trying to reinitialize the I at line number 30. At line number 30, I'm trying to reinitialize the I. I'm trying to reinitialize the I. Even though the value is same, this is the reinitialization. Reinitialization. Reinitialization on final variable, not possible. At line number 13, I'll be getting error. Just to check the compilation. Line number 30 cannot assign a value to final variable line. Here also, at line number 5, I'm declaring final int I. At line number 5, I'm declaring final int I. First time I'm initializing the I. First time I'm initializing the I to 10. First time I'm initializing the I to 10. From this point onwards, we cannot be able to modify the content of the I. From this point onwards, I cannot able to modify the content of the I. Why? Because that is final. Once I supply a value to that final variable I, that variable value cannot be modified further. That is fixed. At line number 8, you'll be getting error. Variable I might already have been assigned. Any error? Here, anywhere, we are not trying to initialize the I. We are not trying to initialize the I. Initially, I value initialized with the 10. Then, for J, I'm supplying the I value. That is 10. I value is 10, J value also 10. Now, what is the current I value? 10 plus 10, 20. This expression resulting in 20. That 20 is storing inside J. Earlier, J was 10. Earlier, J was 10. Now it is reinitializing to 20. J I can reinitialize, but I cannot reinitialize. J is the normal variable. You can reinitialize any number of times. But I, you can only initialize once. You cannot able to reinitialize I second time. That means you cannot able to modify the I value once it is getting a value initially. That is fixed. Now what is the I value? What is the I value? 10. What is the J value? 20. What happens? Error. Initially, I value is 0. Then I'm trying to modify the I value. by incrementing I by 1. I plus plus means what? Incrementing the I value by 1. Not possible. Why? Because I is final. I value once I initialize, we cannot able to modify. Now, if it is like this, what happens? What? One now. Okay. Have you understood the unary operators concept? Hmm? What happens in this case? Hmm. Where is I value? 0. Where is I value, man? Default. Do we get the default in case of local variables? In case of local variables, do we get the default value? Do we get the default value? I itself is not initialized. If it is like this, what happens? Hmm? In this case, final E1. I'm assigning one object, initializing with one object. Now E1 is final or not? Can I assign once again? E1 is final. Now F2 is final. F2 is final. Trying to initialize F2. What happens? Final variable S1 cannot be initialized. What happens? Error. Error. Final interarray X. Final interarray X is the final variable, final reference variable. X is the final, X is final. I'm initializing with one array object, new int with the size 2, new int array object with the size 2, new int array object with the size 2. Now, I'm not accessing the X. I'm accessing the index X of 0, X of 1. I'm not accessing X. I'm accessing what? X of 0, X of 1. I'm not trying to reinitialize the X. I'm trying to reinitialize what? Index. I'm not trying to reinitialize what? X. I'm trying to reinitialize index. Index values. Index values. Index values. Index values. I'm not reinitializing the X. I'm trying to reinitialize the index values. Possible. Simply done as the message will get. Here, straight away, I'm trying to reinitialize the X. X is final. This is not possible. This is not possible. Possible. Y is final. Y is final. Cannot assign a new object. Cannot reinitialize the Y. Y is final. Here, error. No error. No error. Observe carefully. Observe carefully. Error or no error? No error. Nowhere you are trying to reinitialize the final. Hmm? Is that so? See, we don't have the main method in this. We don't have the main method in this K class. But it should be syntactically proper. It should be syntactically proper. That is what we are checking. Now, we have one method, static method, test method. It is taking two arguments. One is a non-final variable int I. One is final variable int j. In the body of the test method, both the variables are assigned with values. Then printing the same. Here, this method will execute automatically whether this method is executing by itself automatically without calling. I need to give a call, right? I need to give a call. When I'm giving the call to this test method, I should pass two values or not? I should pass two values. Now, int j is final. Whatever the value I am passing, that value will be final for j. Now I'm trying to reinitialize here j. Not possible. Reinitialization, right? When I'm calling this test method, I'll be passing two values. Then only I can call this test method. Then that value will be final for j. Why? Because j is final variable.
Sir, while calling also we should keep out that.
Simply you can call by supplying the values. That's it. Here reinitialization is happening. Now, whatever the main method is taking the argument, I'm making that argument as final. Args. Is it okay? Is it okay or not? Is it okay or not? We are not modifying the args itself, but we are trying to modify the value of the element that is inside args of zero index. Args of zero. No, it is at all. Here, straight away, I'm trying to reinitialize the args, not the index. So this is not possible. Why? Because args is final. Args is final. Non-static variable int I. Non-static variable int I. Supplying the value 10. That is final. Creating the object to n. N1 I'm reinitializing to new object. Any issues there? Any issues there? No issues at all. Now, already non-static got the value, and that variable is final. Now, while creating the object to O, this non-static variable is loading with the value. Then it is initializing with the 10. Okay, it is getting the value 10. It is getting the value 10. It is getting the value 10. Now this value is fixed. In case of global variables, default values are not surviving if it is declared as final. In case of global variables, in case of global variables, if any variable got declared as final, then there won't be any default value. Then there won't be any default value. Default values are not surviving. In case of global variable default values are not surviving. There won't be any default value for global variable. While I is loading, it is loading with the 10 only. Now, O1.I, I'm trying to initialize to 20. Not possible. Not possible. Hmm. Hmm. Here, final is what? P1 reference variable. Not the I, not I. I is non-final. You can reinitialize the I, no issues at all. But P1, you cannot reinitialize. Here, initially, I is loading with the 10. There is a possibility of calling the test method. We call the test method, I is reinitializing. We call the test method, I is reinitializing. Error. This is also reinitialization. Error. In the constructor body, I'm trying to reinitialize I value. In the body of the IID, I'm trying to initialize the value of x. X is final, not possible. Error. What happens? What happens? No error. Just now only I told you. In case of global variables, default values are not surviving. Why? Because I is final, I is the global variable, non-static. Now, if it is final, it is not getting the default value. Wherever you are declaring, you should supply the value. Otherwise, in the constructor body, you should supply the value for this item. While creating the object to T class, it is not loading with the default value. Why? Because it is final. While you are declaring the I, you should supply the value. Otherwise, another option is in the constructor body, you should give a value to this I. Now, I is not getting the value anywhere. I is not getting the value anywhere. Error. Variable I not initialized in the default constructor also. I is not getting the value.
We are not using that. We are not using. But also we should.
Here, we are not using the I, of course. We are not using the I. But in this case, it is not the local. It is not the local variable. It is the global variable. Whenever you are creating the object, by default, the variable has to load with their default values. Because of it is final, it is not loading with their default values. There is no value now. That is why.
Its final entry is in local and default value is there, sir.
There won't be default value. In case of local variable, there won't be any default value. Observe here. I'm not using it.
But now we can run it.
Whether compilation success or not. No. Why no? Hmm? See, this is the local variable. Okay. I'm not trying to use it. If you try to use it, what do you get? I might not have been initialized. That is error. Okay. Now, here observe what happens. By loading I, see straight away, you can use the, what you can use? Straight away, here, T1 dot I, like that you can use. Here, there is no value for I. Why? Because it is final. In case of final, global variables not getting the default value. It is not loading with the default value. Hence, you cannot use it. Now, while loading itself, while you are loading itself, while you are creating the object itself, it should get the value. Now this I is not getting the value anyway. While declaring also, and in the constructor as well, it is not getting the value. So that is why we are getting the error. Variable I not initialized in the default constructor also. I is not getting the value. Understood? See, in case of global variables, those will be getting the default values. Better. Because of final, it is not getting the default value. So that is why we should supply the value. That is why we should supply the value. But in case of local, it is not getting the default value. It is not getting the default value. Now, simply you can declare it, but you cannot use it. If you use, then only problem. Whether this one is syntactically proper or not. X is getting the value. It's also proper. In the constructor body, I is getting the value. Hmm? Yeah. Second term initialization, not possible. Either should be you should supply the value here or here, not both. In this case, no, no. मतलब है. What is the error? Why? So here non-static variable I not getting the value here. Now in the constructor body, it is getting the value. here in the second constructor, I'm trying to reinitialize the same. This dot I means what? This I. Simply I means what? This argument I. Simply I means what? This argument I. This dot I is what? It is pointing to non-static global I. Simply I means what? This argument I. Reinitialization at line number 11. Now observe. At line number 10, I'm getting the error. At line number 10, I'm getting the error. Why? You know already. Right or wrong? While creating the object to Y class, while calling this constructor, you will be supplying one value. Right or wrong? You will be supplying one value for final in time. Now, that is the value for this final in time variable I. I'm trying to initialize here in the body of the constructor. Not possible.
Which will supply the value.
Hmm?
Which will supply the value.
Which will what?
Again, how it will be initialized.
I'm passing 10 here. 10 is the value of I. Now I'm initializing to 89. Not possible. If you comment on this, error at line number 11. Why I'm not getting error?
Because
Hmm?
because it is taking final entry as global.
Why?
It is taking in this
Why?
concept.
Why? Whether I'm creating only one object, two objects. For the first time, when you are creating the object to Y, no argument constructor you are calling. Now that I is getting the value through this no argument constructor. That is fine. Second time I'm creating the object, now it is entirely a new copy of I. Right? Entirely a new copy of I. Now this I is getting the value through this argument Y, argument constructor. Right? There is no link between those two I's. Two objects I'm creating. Right? Two objects I'm creating. First time I'm calling no argument constructor. Now this I is getting the value through this no argument constructor, this dot item. Second time I'm creating the object. Now new copy of I will be not the same copy. New copy. Right or not? This is a non-static or not?
Yes.
Yes. Every time when I'm creating the object, non-static members will be loaded. Now for this I, here I'm calling what? Argument constructor. Argument constructor. We have the argument constructor. It is taking what? 10. Here I'm not initializing the I here. Here I'm giving a value to this dot I. This is the I. Now I is getting the value. If I comment this node, then there is a problem. Then there is a problem. I is not getting the value. Confusion.
Your I was 20, also reinitializing from 10 to 20.
That's it. Here 10 is applying to what? This I. Right? Now this one is local to this Y constructor. That is why I'm using this dot I. This dot I means what? Non-static I. This dot I means what? Non-static. You say simply I know. Then initialization comes. This I. Now syntactically it is proper. See, while you are creating the object, you don't call two constructors at a time. Only one constructor. Only one constructor for one object of creation. While creating that object, all the non-static members will be loaded. Right or not?
First constructor will be not be getting any value, so I will be not having any value, as you said. It's not like step.
In this case, you are creating the object to Y class. Now what happens? I is not having the value. It is calling which constructor? No argument constructor. I is getting the value through no argument constructor. I is getting the value through no argument constructor. Second time you are creating the object. Only this much execution only right for this object creation. Right or wrong? That is why I value is 10. Now second time you are creating the object into Y. All the non-static members will be loaded. Now this I is getting initialized through argument constructor of Y. Now this I is getting the value in the body of the argument constructor. This is our time. New copy, right? In this case, compilation success. Compilation success. What is your confusion?
Maybe the once you call those two I's, you don't consider format in the
What we should get? In a 20. See if you remove this, better. Why? Because this theta is final. Now if you keep like this is also error. Right or not?
Yes, sir. 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 Yes, s Non-static is used.
Now,
Error. I is equals to
error. Okay. Error. Now only I showed example. Hmm?
but it should
Now only I explained. No.
Fresh topic.
Ah. See here, two times you are creating the object. Assume. First time you are calling this constructor. Second time you are calling this constructor. While creating the object, while creating one object, while creating one object, simultaneously can you call the two constructors? All right. Only one constructor only you are calling. It is only getting one value. Either you can get 10 or you can get 8. But here, ನೋಡ ನೋಡಿರ ಅಕ್ಕ simply yeah. No. At line number 7, why? Why?
I is
Where?
variable 7.
See, here, while creating the object, you are calling this constructor. Now it is calling what? Current class argument constructor by supplying 10 as the value. Now it is getting the value through argument constructor I is equal to 80. This I is getting the value or not? But after finishing this, it is coming back to execute this one. Once again, I'm trying to initialize the I value. Not possible. Right or wrong? That is why. If you comment this, it is fine. No issues. Hmm? If you call this constructor, I value is what? When creating the object, if you call this constructor, I value is 8. Now, at this one.
taking the value I equals to 10,
Then
then it is initializing I.
assume that you are calling this constructor while you are creating the object. It is going to the current class non-argument constructor before executing the statement. Now here I is getting the value, this I is getting the value 10. Now coming back, trying to reinitialize the I value to 80. Not possible. Is it okay? Yes. Error. Error. Pakana. Why? Error. What happens? Think. Think no.
This data is only for non-argument.
Assume that you are creating the object and you are calling the no argument constructor. This I is getting the value through this no argument constructor. Assume that while creating the object, you are calling the argument constructor Z1 that is taking int I. We are passing one value. Now this int I is not final. This int I is not final. Now if you say simply I, what happens? It is referring to local I. This I is local to this constructor. This I you can able to initialize any number of times. But in the body of the argument constructor, there is no value for this I. Right, Aram? That is why. This I is not getting initialized if you are calling the argument constructor. If you say this dot I, no, it's not. It is referring to what? This, not this. Okay. Now, if you want to refer to this local I, simply say I. Now also there is no issue. But if you make it as final, then there is an issue.
Again, we initialize.
Fine. In the IID, I'm trying to initialize the I value. Possible? When IBs will execute?
First,
Before executing the constructor, right or not? Before executing the constructor or after executing the constructor? Before. I this will be executing before executing the constructor. Now this I is getting the value through IIB. No issues at all. Now SIB. What SIB?
SIB will also execute for value.
Then
But like why we consider this as what? Why we consider like SIB?
SIB also will see no issues. Answer. Reinitialization of final variable for one object creation. All the IIBs will execute from top to bottom before executing the constructor. I is getting the value in the first IIB itself. Now it is comes under reinitialization. Not possible. This is also initialization. If you are giving the value while you are declaring itself, you should not give a value in the constructor also, in the IAB also. Hmm. Initialization. Before executing the constructor, it is executing the IIB. In the IIB, it is getting the evaluation step. It is executing the constructor, then initialization. Hmm? Yes. I is not getting any value. I is not initializing in the default constructor also. Error I'll get. No issues at all. Understood? This is if I give final on variables. Now, we'll see some of the static. In case of static also, default variables, sorry, default values are not surviving. Default values. In case of static also will get default values, right or wrong? But if it is final, it is not getting the value. Now, in the static block, we are getting the value or not? Right or not? In the static block. When does this static will execute? Whenever class is loading. Now I is getting the value. I is getting the value or not? So initially, what you will do, take out this. right? I is not getting the value. What is the static? It is getting the value through static block, SIP block. In case of non-static variable, it maybe get the value through the constructor. In case of static, it maybe get the value from static block. This comes under reinitialization. Reinitialization. Whenever I is loading and executing, it is initialized with the 10. Then, from top to bottom, static block also should execute. While executing, I is getting reinitialized. Not possible. Yep, definitely we cannot. Right? Error. It's like this. Error. All the static members, all the static blocks, SIB blocks, executes from top to bottom. Now, what I'll get? H1 data is what? 10. H2 data is what? H3 data is what? 10. issues? No issues at all. You will get the values as 10, 10, 10. Now, if anything is final, we can consider it as constant. If anything is final, we can consider it as constant. Now, in Java program, if anything is constant, there is a standard to represent those variables using uppercase. You should represent those variables. If anything is constant, we should represent those variables in the uppercase. Those variables in the uppercase. That is the industry standard. That is the industry standard. In the Java language also, internally, they have used the same standard. If any variable is final, that is what static, not static, constant, constant. If any variable is constant, that we are representing through uppercase. In the thread class, we have these many attributes. This is the inbuilt in the thread class. That is the inbuilt class, and we have these attributes. We'll come to know what are these in the thread. In the multi-threads, you'll come to know. These are all the static variables attributes, and the values for this is fixed. They are also follow the same standard. If anything is constant, we should represent it in the uppercase. Now these values are constant for every thread. Constant. That is, minimum priority will be what? 1. Normal priority will be what? 5. Maximum priority will be 10. We'll come to my threads. Final static also possible. Static final also possible. No issues at all. If you have two words, use the underscore. Private static final. Possible? Private static final. I'm making this variable as static final as well as private. Legal combinations. Okay. Legal combination. No issues at all. We can interchange this. Static private final also. Final static private also. What happens? In In the interface class, I told something. All the variables of the interface, public, static, final. If it is final, where I is getting the value? Right or wrong? Actually, initialize the I. There itself. I should initialize the I there itself. By default, interface variables are what?
Public, static,
Public, static, final. That is why. All these are legal combinations. All these are legal combinations. You can keep it or leave it. Simply you can say int I is equal to 10. That means exactly same as this. Public, static, final. You can keep it or leave it. And all these are legal combinations. I can declare a method as final. If you are declaring any method as final, you cannot override that method in the subclass. If any method declared as final, you cannot override that method in the subclass. You cannot override final method. You cannot override final method. Test one is final. Test one is final. Test one is final.
The extension possibility is final.
Yes.
Final method can be extended.
Here what I'm doing. X extends P. Now here you don't have this. Now what happens? Observe. Here I'm not trying to override the test one. I'm trying to override the test two. Was it? Because test two is not final. Now if I try to override the test one, abstract to final, illegal combination. Abstract to final is illegal combination. If any method is abstract, compulsory, I should give implementation in the subclass or not. If the method is declared as final, how can I give the implementation? Because we cannot override now. That is why. Illegal combination, abstract and final. Abstract and static also illegal combination. In. Yes. Why? Because static members are not involving in the polymorphism. Static members are not involving in the polymorphism. Static methods are not involving in the polymorphism. Now, abstract static is the illegal combination. Java JDK 1.8. They have made some changes to interface. They have improved the interface. How they have improved? Any number of default and static methods you can keep. Any number of concrete static and default methods you can keep from Java JDK 1.8. Any number of static, any number of default methods. I can make a class as final. If you are making class as final, that class cannot be extended further. If you are making class as final, that class cannot be extended further. Final class we cannot extend. Cannot inherit from final U. Abstract to final, illegal combination. Why? Why illegal?
Because we cannot call it in subclass.
Here, abstract means what? If some of the methods are abstract, you need to give the body in the subclass. Because of final, it cannot be extended further. Can I make the class as private? General class. Not possible. Okay? Not possible. You cannot make the general class as private. That is possible in inner class. You'll come to know what is that. That is possible in inner class, not in general class. There is a concept called inner class. They will come to know. Class inside another class. For that class, you can make it as private. Not for the general class. Okay, this much is enough for today. I'll take the attendance now. Vinay MS. Vinay MS. Arshita. Arshita. Chaitra VK.
Present, sir.
Basuraj. Madesha.
Yes, sir.
Kiran, Kiranar, Syed Afsar Pasha, Mustafa,
Present, sir.
Spurti, Kirtana, Nishita Prakash, Mohammed Sufian, Chandan, Nandish Babu,
Yes, sir.
Ram Kumar,
Present, sir.
Rakshit Kumar,
Present, sir.
Archit Garg, Vaishnavi Hegde, Preetam Biyar,
Present, sir.
Gagandeep,
Yes, sir.
Salma Taj, Tarun Singh,
Yes, sir.
Abhishek Singh,
Yes, sir.
Gagan,
Yes, sir.
Ahmad Omar Kasim,
Yes, sir.
Deep SH, Shruti R, Chandanayam, Yamunayam,
Yes, sir.
Harish D, Yamunayam,
Yes, sir.
Harish D, Chaitanyam,
Present, sir.
Shalini,
Present, sir.
Kamala,
Present, sir.
Yashaswini Anna,
Present, sir.
Samya Zuma, Shreya S, Darshan S, Darshan S. Okay, thank you. We'll continue in the next class.